Hey everyone, welcome back to Between the Slides podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Pinnell. Another episode of a Thoughts from the Road. I find myself traveling again around the time that I usually record a podcast. Just like the first Thoughts from the Road in episode 36, I am again traveling, both for work, but then also for a friend of mine's bachelor party this weekend, which should be fun. And I wanted to share today my thoughts on a book I've had actually for a long time. The book is called Streetwise Project Management. It's by Michael S. Dobson. It's from 2003, so it's pretty dated. But the information, the thoughts about working with people, being a project manager, and then, of course, the standards, the project management body of knowledge, or PMBOK style standards, have not changed a ton at their core. You know, doing critical path method, PERT, all those kinds of things, the different phases, that's all in there. What I really want to focus on today and give you my 2 cents again for the price that you paid to hit my logo and press play, which I thank you for is one of my thoughts on the 12 immutable laws of project management. And like myself, I had to double check what immutable meant. It means unchanging over time. They're the same. Thank you, Siri, for that definition. Before I get into those and my 2 cents, I also wanted to talk about something else that I've talked about a lot on this episode, and probably almost all of them, and those are that SMART objective. Whereas for me, it's always been specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. And Michael Dobson gives a little bit different take on that in his book on page 119, actually. And he uses specific, same, measurable, which is the same. And then one thing that he does that I think is also really good, that's a slight take on the A, is agreed to, right? So instead of just saying, are these achievable, have folks agreed to them? And so typically in my mind, that's been a component of, does everyone agree they're achievable and how we're measuring them and things like that? But I thought it was a neat way to spell out the A, to agreed to. Realistic is the same in his model. And then the other very project management focused and less incident management focused way for the T in SMART objective is time constrained instead of like time oriented or time based, meaning we're going to slap a time like by the end of the operational period or by this time exactly. So time constrained, because we have those triple constraints right in project management, or maybe even the 4, depending on the version you look at of, time or schedule, cost, resources, and then quality you can throw in there. So, those are constraints that can hem up any project or make it go really well. But I thought thinking about the A in SMART objective as agreed to, or in addition to achievable and agreed to, was cool. Again, as the time constrained. Particularly with, as I've had in the past, regulatory projects where it's, hey, we have to do this by this date, or maybe there's a consequence, or, a certain, new rule or law kicks in or something like that. So it is constrained by that, and you have to meet a certain date. So I thought that was interesting. So I hope you all find that too, and it helps spur thought like it does for me. So these 12 immutable laws of project management, for folks that have been project managers for a little bit or worked with teams really for a little bit, you'll still understand it. This is not specific doing Gantt chart stuff. This is really applies to teams, folks that have been in team environments, led them, but particularly project management. And again, like I do, people applying incident management skills to project management or public safety or something else. So you all will recognize this stuff for sure. So the first one is a reality. Just like in incident management, we say, as soon as I print this plan, it's wrong and it's out of date. Well, for the first immutable law of project management, according to the list that's in Dobson's book, and there's other ones out there, no project's going to be on time, in budget, have the same staff, or do what it's supposed to do, right? And that, I think, is probably the truest of these, from the standpoint that no project will ever be perfect. And while we strive for being exactly on time and under budget to save money and getting our resources released and having high quality and the cost of things is low, some of those things are not going to work. And there's honeymoon periods in projects where everything's in the green, it's going great, but there are going to be ups and downs, and that I think should be okay. with you as a project manager or an incident manager, leaders, just because of the realities of what happens every day. And different folks have different expectations, but it's just true, right? You're going to spend a little more here and there. You can budget really well. That's an art too, even though there's all these calculations. Knowing way early when you don't even have specific requirements or exactly how much time you need, and really good planning to try and estimate a budget is a super big challenge. And so that's a really hard target to hit. The schedule, you can try and hit a little more accurate, because you could use maybe past projects, like, how long has it taken typically to program this kind of thing in a similar project. So you can kind of anecdotally get close to a schedule. Your quality, should always be high, and the resources, availability for those. But, so we can do so much as people working together. We can use calculations, tools, software, all that kind of stuff. But again, you're probably going to be not on time, not on the same time, maybe a little early even. So not just a bad thing. Over or under budget, maybe. People will switch out due to illness, job changes. They needed to go do a different projects, and it may have variation in exactly how it works. So something to consider. I thought was very interesting and very true. Another thing, so the second immutable of the 12 immutable laws of project management, according to Dobson, is that fuzzy objectives can help us avoid the estimating corresponding costs. So it's kind of a way of saying, basically, if you keep the objectives not super specific, not smart, you keep them fuzzy, then you kind of won't get embarrassed or wrong when you're estimating costs, right? I'm not big on this one. I like solid, smart objectives. I think they are beneficial, but I understand it, right? And you all probably do as well. If you set fuzzy guidelines, then it's harder to get kind of pigeonholed into, well, you said exactly this. And there is some art to that and some value in making your smart objectives. Whereas if you give yourself a small timeline instead of of weeks, instead of by the end of a quarter, that's a way where you can hem yourself up. Or for this budget piece, if you say within $5 as opposed to within X percent of the budget, or something like that. So I'm not big on this law, but I get it. It makes sense. If you're fuzzy with your objectives, then you kind of can avoid being pointed at when it comes to the costs, so to speak. But it's also not really true. You're the project manager. You're in charge of your team. You're leading whatever. So you're still going to be responsible for good estimates or the best estimates. So not one of my favorite ones here. The third one, the effort to correct issues or problems increases over time. So this, to me, the first thing that popped into my head visually was that time wedge. I talked about this last episode for contingency planning, right? When something happens, you have less options over time. Well, for issues that aren't managed well, that we fail to correct, the effort to correct those is going to increase over time. So the more we're allowing, bad software to sit out there, the harder it's going to be to get people to come use it again, or other issues like that. It's just going to be an uphill battle, as opposed to if we address these things earlier on, then it's not going to need as much effort, because we can kind of nip it in the bud, is the pretty accurate saying for that kind of stuff. And so, again, the longer we take to address those, it's going to just be more of an uphill battle over time. The purpose is understood differently by each person, right? So number 4, the purpose of a project will be understood differently by each person. And we will not understand how they can't understand, even if we explain it to the best of our ability clearly, in simple terms and technical terms, depending on our audience, right? Because if we're talking to tech folks, we're going to make it really technical. If we're talking to leaders, maybe high level, how it equates to the overall mission. And as strong as you do that, people still won't understand it, the purpose. And that's just going to happen, right? We all communicate differently. We absorb differently. We can relate differently to different projects, whether it's an infrastructure, a technology, finding a missing person, something like that. That one's a pretty more straightforward, right? Everyone should understand the purpose is to find the person. What they may not understand is how we do that or why we're doing some things. Whereas a project, Could be this one-time unique thing that's a certain number of hours that's either a process or a product or, a device or something like that. And some folks just won't be able to relate to the purpose of it. And this is where in that ADKAR model, we talked about change management a few episodes back that I shared, where we really need to hone in on that awareness and make sure folks do understand not how we're going to make the change, like how are we going to do this or what workflow will change, but why. Like, why are we going to do this? What's that understanding? And so when you're a project manager, let's make sure that everybody on our team does understand the purpose. And for the percentage of folks that do not, let's just make sure they understand the work, that we're there to answer any questions, that we bring in whoever we need to help get the best picture we can. And that's the best that we can do. Number 5, I like this. So we've heard of tangible benefits and intangible benefits. And so in the book, Dobson states this, and I don't think he made these up. There's a few different variation versions, as I mentioned, if you Google 12 Immutable Laws of Project Management. But these are pretty true, this number 5. So intangible benefits, you can't measure them, right? You can't measure happiness. The closest thing I've seen to do that is a survey or a smile on someone's face or, emotions, those kind of things. And measurable benefits are tangible, right? If I save you time, then, we can look at time studies and see how much time we saved in labor and effort, and we can measure that and, bring that back to cost. And so that's pretty tangible. We could look at metrics, number of uses of something on the system, of call time, if you're in emergency response or public safety. So looking at, time from dispatch to call, we've got data, tons of data. We could look at if we're using driving tracking systems, just thinking of EMS or fire or other vehicles that have that on them. We can see how effective people are on the road. We can't measure what their emotions are at whatever phase in the response, or in this instance for project management, we can't measure, as the workforce become happier, did it make their job easier? And there's other intangibles as well. Did it make their day better? Things like that. So that's hard to do. So to that, when you design measurables, when you design benefit realization, be thinking about, if they're intangibles and they're not measurable, then they're not real benefits unless you can measure them, right? So always focus on, for an example, we are trying to save X amount of time per shift for someone with this new workflow, and you're going to do a study before and a study after your project, right? You could do that with a device. You could do that, like I mentioned, with processes. You could do that. It's in management team wise. Let's say part of what you want to measure is how well was our response as a team. How well did we get to these steps in the process? If we didn't, why didn't we? Same thing as a project. That could be measures of a tangible thing. Is how far along in each of the deliverables or the processes for this project did we accomplish, and how many didn't we do, even though we got to the end of the project or something like that. So tangible benefits is what we want to focus on, and how are we going to measure them? How are we going to tell the difference from before and after? Number 6, if the project manager can work on a project part-time, then they need more to do. So this is interesting, probably in this day and age. Again, this was from 2003, so I wasn't in project management then. This was actually before I was just getting ready. I was an IT manager doing computer support for an executive support team for Discovery, the company that runs the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, all those folks, and was getting ready to use my GI Bill to go back to school and get my Homeland Security degree. So I got this book, picked it up, looked really cool, was ready to move up into management, go into school, focus on business management, turn it into my Homeland Security degree, public health, public safety, all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. I would be interested to know the lay of the land in 2003 project management wise, meaning did most projects have one project manager and full-time that's what they did was just one project, which my wife did project management then and for a while, which I'm anecdotally through her thinking back then, I'm pretty sure she had more than one thing on her plate project-wise. For myself as well, most of the work that I do is part-time on multiple projects. So this is another one where I'm kind of like, if I was on a project that was like to build a new football stadium, that makes total sense, right? That's an enormous thing. It's a huge venture. It takes many project managers, program managers, project whatever, to get all the different facets of that done. And it's so enormous that makes sense to me that here's one thing. If you're in an organization that's mature, has good infrastructure, even if there's infrastructure projects, and you'll have multiple applications going in at the same time across different work streams. And so you'll have, part-time on different projects, but full-time project managers. So, this may be if the position is part-time in general, as opposed to if you're assigned to a project part-time, then you need to do more. And could you do full-time on every single project or on one project and that's all you do? Probably I could see that with some of the stuff that I've done when you want to get to every single dotted I and cross T from every single administrative thing and every box check of every document in every process and the PMBOK kind of thing. But would you be better because you had all the administrative stuff done? Or if you got the big ticket items done and you got the team through successfully and safely and all the good things that we want to do as project managers. So that one's very interesting as well. Number 7, this one is just kind of, speaks to part of the first one about not always being on time, or that's always a challenge. So if you have not a lot of planning or not great planning, then your project's going to take 3 times longer. If you have really good planning and you put a lot into it, it'll just take 2 times as long. So definitely seen this where there's a lot of great work, a lot of great planning, and it still takes a while. Maybe upfront estimates were low, maybe other things popped up. Maybe it was a new venture. You'd never done something like this before, so it was hard to benchmark or get a level of effort on what you actually thought was going to happen. Certainly, though, if you put that work in up front, to the best of your ability, finding subject matter experts that have done this, working with, the vendor on, hey, what have other folks done similar to this that we can kind of build off of, that will help get you close to the twice as long, or maybe not twice as long. That's certainly not a goal. And definitely, and I'm sure most folks listening have seen this, if you put hardly anything into planning, or it's poor, or you just, kind of walk through the motions, but you're not really engaging as a team and having good discussions and letting your team experts drive what's happening because they really know what's going on, then it's absolutely going to take way longer. And some of this you won't pick up yourself or as an organization until you've done a certain type of project a few times, and or even once, and go, wow, let's make sure we have a good lessons learned from this. And then you can apply it, and then sometimes it's just going to take longer because it's new. So the goal certainly is not 2 times longer, but more planning certainly will decrease the length of time a project should take, and less planning is definitely going to make it a lot more work. If your project is going good, this is number 8, and everything's smooth sailing, something is about to happen, right? And that's kind of, I call this number 8, the Murphy's Law of project management, right? I mean, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong, and there's plenty of other sayings, but, it's true. So, hey, everything looks good. This is great. You could even be way into it. Everything looks good. Technology's working well. The new process is working. Whatever it is, the new devices are in there. And then still, there's different areas between, is it technology, users? Is it me? Is it something else that's holding people up? But there's definitely challenges that will come up. And so it's always kind of, think back to that contingency planning we talked about last episode, and then what? So smooth sailing, but keep looking forward and thinking about, okay, what else could happen right here? What's going on? For number 9, this one is teams really don't like or detest, and I'm paraphrasing. If you look at the Streetwise Project Management, you'll see the exact wording, but essentially teams don't like or detest, even as the term he uses, reporting, right? So if you do regular reporting, weekly reports, or you have a dashboard that's, on demand, kind of almost real-time reporting, some folks aren't big on that because it's going to show gaps. It's going to show how much work is or isn't being done, how many hours are or not being put in. And that is tough, but it's also the right thing to do. It's kind of like when you do an after-action report, you should put in the best that you can, because it's going to help and not be embarrassed about what's going on. So having said that, as a project manager, even though you're going to update, you're going to do status reports, your metrics, all that kind of stuff, I would try to avoid still having surprisingly negative maybe things about your team's performance pushed out or showing without your team knowing what's going on. And that should really never happen anyway, because if we're driving good teams, if we're part of that good team, if we're leading good teams, we're making sure everyone's engaged at every step of the way. So even if it comes up on a review, hey, why are you, at this color indicator that's negative, or number indicator, whatever you use in your organization, the team should already know, yep, we know we're way behind. We got a red light, or we're 5 out of 5 for slowness or whatever it is. And here's why, and here's how we're working on getting it better. And so it shouldn't be a surprise. So folks don't like it, kind of like they don't like real feedback in an after action report. Nobody wants to be told that they didn't work together as partners in an active shooter response. They want to be told that it was perfect, and if it ever happens, they'll save every life, they'll stop the bad guy perfectly, and everyone's going to get along well. If you've been around an active shooter exercise or read the responses or been to a response, that never happens perfectly, right? There's some great examples, unfortunately, from horrible things where some things did go well, but there's always stuff to learn. And the best way, and a great example I've seen from some organizations and cities that unfortunately have had some horrible incidents lately in the past couple of years, is they were very transparent to themselves and everyone else to say, here's what we did well, here's what we have to work on, here's what we're going to do to fix it, right? And that, to me, is what reporting is in near real time. Here's what's going well, we're good in budget, we're good on schedule, our resources are really hurting because we've got 50 other projects, or you could switch out any one of those. We're all messed out of money because we had to pay for extra training or something like that. So make sure that your teams are comfortable with metrics and that they know where they're going to be posted. If they have any questions, that they're going to come to you and you're going to alleviate any fears they have, and just do what you can to help them. And of course, make sure you are ready to answer why things are happening when leadership asks the question or sees that number or color indicator that is not necessarily good. This one I thought was very interesting. This is number 10 of the 12 Immutable Laws of Project Management. So projects will progress rapidly right up till they hit 90%. Then they'll stay at 90% forever. So I've definitely seen this. I've seen it also where it goes to 100 or whatever, but this is great because everything's going along. You get toward the end, you're kind of nearing executing end, you're closing, you've already gone live or started the new process or put the new stuff in or found the person or whatever, and then there's always stuff left over. Is it the handoff, right, from project to support? Is it some big ticket item that comes up that we missed in the requirements? Is it re-education? Is it whatever else? And then it's stuck at this 90%, which is the vast majority of the project. But then comes the hard part of, okay, what do we stick with? Do we stick with the project? Do we hand it off at 90% complete? Are we good with this? And that's really good discussions you've got to have internally with all the partners involved on the project and decide what is going to happen. But it's very interesting because it feels very true. Everyone's efficient. Everyone's getting things done. Everyone's psyched about getting this new thing out there for people. We talk about that after action report, we put it all together. Or maybe at another phase we get bogged down. Maybe we're stuck in go live. Maybe we're stuck in the after action part of it. But at some point you kind of sit at 90% for a while trying to get it to 100 and hand it off and get to the next one once you've really completed and done everything you need to do. This one to me talks about scope creep. So this is number 11. If the project, and in the book, this is the last one, and the kind of joke of it is, as it's listed, so it says the 12 Immutable Laws of Project Management, which states that it's a 91.6% specification with 11 out of 12 things, so there's actually only 11 in the book. When I did a Google search, I found 12 listed on the internet. Someone wrote a LinkedIn article that had 13, and this one, it says there's 12, but there's only 11. It's kind of a speaks to the changing some of the stuff we talked about earlier. But so number 11, or the last one here for us, is that if the project content is allowed to change, then the rate of change will exceed the progress, right? So if you allow your scope to creep, you're going to be reining in scope more than you're going to be moving forward, right? That's what this says to me, almost exactly, just with different wording. So scope creep is a huge issue, right? So scope, schedule, cost, greatly important. But scope in particular is we want to start with the best idea of what we are trying to do, what process we're trying to change, what change management we're trying to implement, what new things we're trying to put in the environment, and try and stick with those. And now this is, again, waterfall focused, project management body of knowledge focus, which is largely this, then this, then this, phase-wise, from initiating, planning, executing, monitor, control, kind of sprinkled on everything, and closing, or executing and then closing. And so that's kind of that model. Whereas if you're in the agile world and doing Scrum and things like that, you'll do sprints. You'll shore up or validate the scope ongoing. So this one is a little different. Again, it's from 2003. Even the PMBOK now has agile stuff in it, so that's a little bit different. If you're in software development, certainly that is true. But even if you're not truly and solidly validating the scope, whether it's in agile or at the beginning with a waterfall thing, then you're still going to be managing scope creep more than you're going to be making progress. So we really want to shore up those objectives, those deliverables, those requirements, whatever you call it for whatever industry you're in, or kind of all of those, or eventually get involved in project plans. So interesting list. Again, run through them real quick. If projects, typically are not going to be on time, budget, within scope, have the same staff, or do what they're supposed to many times, right? That doesn't mean they're not going to be very, very close, but that's it. Fuzzy objectives mean you can kind of, get some leeway from the budget. That was number 2. Number 3, effort to correct things that you've let go will get harder over time. Number 4, folks are going to understand the purpose differently. Some folks, regardless of how clearly you try and explain it, will never get it. Number 5, intangible benefits are not measurable, so that means they're not real, so always look for tangible benefits. Number 6, if the project manager is part-time, then they need more work to do. That depends, I think, on workload, on the setup of your organization, that kind of stuff, so not huge on that one. Number 7, less planning equals longer, more planning equals it won't take as long, right? That's just, good process with good people is going to be more progress. Number 8, if the project is going good, doing well, something's going to happen, or at least always be thinking, and then what? Number 9, teams don't like reporting, but don't let them be surprised if there's a negative or low numbers or low progress or something like that. And it can take some of that away. Number 10, project will go fast up to the 90% mark, then they'll kind of sit there, right? At what stage that happens, obviously it's near the end. 90% is almost all of it. So be on the lookout for that to earlier remove barriers. And number 11, which is the last of our list of 12, 91.6% completion, is if the content's allowed to change, then the rate of change is going to be faster than the progress. So again, if the scope's all over the place, you're going to be chasing the scope more than you're going to be making progress. So I hope this was helpful. It was very interesting to me. When I first, this book is old and I've had it for a while, and it's one of those books between moves and progressing in my career I haven't looked at a ton, but it had this thing, the way that it's written, because it also does talk about the mindset of a project manager, the type of person that can do well as a project manager, not just the same stuff that's in the project management body of knowledge. So Streetwise Project Management by Michael S. Dobson. My copy's from 2003. I think there's newer editions. I would recommend it. It's written really well. It's put together really well. It flows well. And this is just one of the many things that's in that book. So thank you all for listening. We're coming up on 4,800 downloads, which is very cool. I really appreciate it. A lot more volume and regularity lately. I hope that's because the content's better, and I'll keep working to keep delivering that. And so we're on Facebook between the slides. If you have questions, if you have comments about this episode once I post it up, definitely provide that feedback. I'd really appreciate it. On Twitter, PenelKG, and kp.bts.podcast@gmail.com with any direct questions. And on the Between the Slides site, the shows are updated. I've got a couple to upload there, and you can get a hold of me. You can request to be on the show there. You can do that too through our notes. All the iTunes notes and other ones have links to that as well. So thank you again very much, everyone. Have a great day. Happy hump day. Get through the rest of the week strong. Stay safe, and Godspeed.